It was a normal Tuesday evening. I was sitting at my computer, listening to strange noises outside my window and watching combat footage on the internet. What I'm about to tell you here is less about what I ended up learning and more about how I got there, the trail that I followed through the internet. I don't know, I could have found this out much more quickly just by clicking on one news article, or I could have skipped straight to the end, but I didn't. And I think that's the interesting part. Like I said, I was watching combat footage, something that's more and more available on the internet today, and I'm not going to get into all of the moral, psychological, and probably philosophical ramifications of watching this kind of content, but there's a lot of conflicts going on around the globe right now, as I'm sure you're aware, and more people are wearing GoPros and recording with phones, and there's drone footage. More and more of this stuff is popping up online, and sometimes I watch it, okay? And the other night, I saw a few videos that featured something called a Shahed 136 drone. And after I watched a few of these videos, I thought, wait a second, what is a Shahed 136 drone? This happens occasionally. I find myself Googling things to figure out what it is. And it turns out it's like a Kamikaze drone. These are supplied to Russia by Iran. And then I found on Google Maps where these drones are now being made in Russia and not just being shipped in from Iran. Obviously, it's understandable that Russia would like to have some level of independence in producing these drones instead of having them shipped in. Anyways, the location where these drones are being made is called the Alabuga SEZ. Of course, I didn't know what SEZ stood for, but I looked it up, and it's some sort of special district that they have several of in Russia. It stands for Special Economic Zone. When I looked it up and found it on Google Maps, it pretty much looks like a big, fancy industrial park. Like there's just a bunch of warehouses and factories in a big grid pattern in the middle of nowhere, all next to each other, and roads connecting them. Like I was just clicking through different things on Google Maps, and like there was a automotive factory, a toilet paper factory, just a bunch of different things, and it looked pretty boring and straightforward. However, I quickly realized that this SEZ concept was something different than my idea of like an industrial park. For one thing, there were multiple articles about how this one, the Alabuga SEZ, was the best performing one in all of Russia. Like it was accounting for like 40, 50, 60% of all of the taxable income of all the SEZs. And I think there's like some other, like obviously I'm not an expert of this sort of thing, of like how Russian policies and economics work, but there's different rules for the companies that establish themselves within the SEZs, that probably rules that incentivize them to do so, right? And then there was one article talking about how the customs department at this SEZ had been raking in so much. And then I continued looking around on Google Maps, and I started clicking on some of the different buildings and companies and factories that were in there, and I noticed that people had been leaving reviews on them. And this gave me a totally different opinion on what was going on there, mostly because it was cool to see something that seemed like it was from a human perspective, from people who had been there, worked there, and totally changed my view on the place. First of all, it was also around this time that I realized that the Alabuga SEZ was 25 square kilometers. It's a really big place. All right, some of these reviews seem like the kind of things that people would say about any place they went. People complaining about parking, complaining about not being able to find a toilet. Here's some reviews. And these are all reviews that Google auto-translated from Russian, by the way, so I could be missing some things and maybe some nuances. I don't know. People complaining about not being able to find any cafes in the whole place and saying that they need them. People complain about road quality. A lot of complaints about having to wait a long time at customs. And apparently you have to take your passport to get in and out. and long time for unloading and loading. I guess a lot of people go in just if they're truck drivers to load and unload their truck. Some people were complaining that it's just so big and there's not enough signs and it's easy to get lost. Also, at this point, I do feel like it's important to point out that in my brief experience at looking at Russian Google reviews, there might be a slight over-reviewing problem. Some people have this little local guide title on Google reviews, or maybe, I don't know, maybe there's just incentives to review everywhere you go. Because even outside of the Alabuga SEZ, I clicked on a bridge. No, just an overpass, like one road going over another, and this overpass had reviews. 7 of the reviews were just between 3 and 5 stars with no comment. And then there was one 2-star review that said, "The bridge is like a bridge, not distinguished by anything. You can drive under it. You can drive along it." So take that with a grain of salt. It seems like these people are just kind of crazy about reviewing things, maybe even when it doesn't merit a review. From what I gathered, people either come here to work for the day from nearby towns, or there's also lodging. I think they call them hostels, where you can pay to stay and then work, so you don't have to commute back and forth. Anyways, I have gotten sidetracked by the sheer immensity and strangeness of the SEZ. I decided to figure out which warehouse or factory these drones were being built in. I tracked down a few different articles and sources which seemed to pinpoint a warehouse. And, I tried, like dragging the little Google Street View guy to see if there was a street view of the warehouse. It seemed so mysterious because a lot of the warehouses had little markers on top of them based, marking, like what company was in there. But the warehouse in question had nothing around it that I could click on to get a better view of it. I was trying to figure it out. Until I found one nearby warehouse that had something in it called Alabuga Polytech, which seemed to be some kind of school. And this was very interesting because you know how sometimes people upload those photospheres to Google Maps where you can just it's like one point of Google Street View. You can look around 360-degree views. It's like someone put a 360-degree camera on a tripod and moved it around and from room to room type thing. Sometimes people use these for real estate listings. Anyways, this Alabuga Polytech is in a warehouse, seemingly sharing it with a car factory, and next to another car factory, and next to the warehouse in question, where it seems like drones are being made, which, by the way, is completely unmarked. And based on another article I read, they never say that they're building drones in there. When they refer to the drones in any documentation, they call them boats. And when they refer to bombs or explosives in internal documentation, they call them bumpers. Anyways, I looked more closely at this Alabuga Polytech. I was looking through the 360 photospheres, which were scattered throughout the whole building. From the dispersal of the photospheres, it looks like they took up about half of I think these are like 40,000 square foot warehouses. They're really big. And I don't know, you could look, if you can go there and look yourself. It's a very nice, nice might be a stretch. It's new at least. It's polished. There seems to be one main hallway where you look straight down it, and it's all glass, and those glass sides branch off into all the different classrooms. And in each of these classrooms, I had weird drone manufacturing things in my brain, so I was a little bit shocked because I found things that looked like they could be bombs and stuff. But I held up my Google Translate. If you hold up the Google camera and you can switch it to translate, it like automatically translates things on the screen, like superimposes them. It feels very futuristic and scientific. And it really looks like these are like training modules, little training stations for doing things like wiring and learning how to do piping. Like, it's a technical school and like electrical stuff. It looks pretty nice. There's like big LCD screens everywhere. In one of the one of the rooms, it looks like maybe an intake room. It just has a bunch of white folding chairs facing one wall. There's a poster on the wall. I tried to translate some of it. I think at the top it says, "These are all the things you need to know to get a job." And then at the bottom it says, "Tell me if they don't teach you this stuff." Something like that. And so I was like, okay, it's kind of bare bones because it's in a warehouse after all. Kind of, I don't know, they're trying to do a lot with a little, kind of. And then I clicked on Alabuga Polytech and tried to read the reviews, because in another article I read that they were possibly using these students to work in the drone factory, like some kind of indentured servitude. You would go there. In fact, they were told that they maybe could be working on drones, but the drones they were told they would be working on was this other company called Albatross LLC, which builds mostly non-military use drones. They're just used for like recon or looking at the farm's fields or something, right? And in a lot of Alabuga Polytech's promotional materials, they have a lot of stuff on YouTube and on YouTube's Russian copy, our YouTube. There's even videos of like famous Russian bloggers going in there, and you can see people working on these Albatross drones in the background. There's like, I don't know, they're like painting the fiberglass together with like into preformed molds and stuff like that. So I thought, hey, maybe there's something in these reviews that hints at what's going on there. When I sorted by default, there was a couple right at the top that seemed a little bit suspicious. For example, this first one says, "My daughter dreams of studying at Alabuga Polytechnic to become a nurse. Since childhood, she has wanted to help people and alleviate the condition of the sick, and we warmly support her. There are not enough doctors, and they are desperately needed. In Alabuga, they teach well, and from there she will definitely emerge as a specialist." And then another one says, "Next year, I will try to enter Alabuga Polytechnic. I'm just finishing 9th grade. I caught fire after a tour of this place. Everything there is so modern and cool. There is nothing like this in any college. Even freshmen are paid." I mean, there are 2 5-star glowing reviews from people who aren't even students. I mean, one was made by the mother of some alleged daughter, and one a 5-star review of someone who allegedly just took a tour. Then I sorted by lowest, and there are a ton of 1-star reviews with no comment at all. So, I mean, it could just be review bombing, sure. But then there's one that says, "They violate many laws of the Russian Federation. I don't recommend going there. Reviews are fake." This one says, "Terrible place, left after the first course." This one says, "We are being used as slaves. Help." Another 1-star, "Everything they promised was a lie." Another one, "Everything is very bad." Another one, "Scammers," and "Don't ever go there." So it's a little bit suspicious. It's like, we got to take it all with a grain of salt. Anyone can leave reviews. Anyone can say anything. But it's I was starting to feel like I was getting a better picture of what was going on there. One of the sources I was using as I was researching this a little bit was from isisonline.org, which I know at the face sounds a little bit or very dubious, but ISIS in this case stands for Institute for Science and International Security, which seems like a from the about page, seems like a non-profit run by scientists who are, trying to, make sure there's not like a lot of nuclear proliferation and stuff going on. I mean, the report they wrote is really long. It even has like an abstract at the beginning, so it seems legit and very thorough. Lots of sources and citations at the end, which were one of the things that led me to a lot of other sources, including lots of like YouTube videos. One of the suspicious things about this place is that when it first started, it seems like the main purpose of Alabuga Polytech was to have some sort of like parallel schooling. Like you could go to school here and also be working in some of the factories in the Alabuga SEZ, a work-study program, if you will. And at the time, before Russia had started invading Ukraine, this was working in some of the car factories there. They have like a couple of car factories, maybe the Albatross drone factory, right? It seemed like that was normal and maybe not that crazy. However, once the full-scale invasion of Ukraine started and Russia decided that it needed to ramp up production of these Shahed 136 drones, they realized they needed a better workforce. They slowly started ramping up production of their own drones, like I said, instead of having to buy them from Iran. But like at the end of 2022, they needed 479 people in the Shahed 136 drone factory to meet the limited quota they were still at without having ramped up all the way. They needed 479 people, but only 16 people had been hired. And so it seems like this is when they kind of changed gears with Alabuga Polytechnic. Now, one of the really predatory things about this place is it seems like it's free to attend, and maybe I think you have to pay a small amount of money to stay in the hostels that are next door. But if you want to leave early, that you have to pay for, because part of the contract you sign is that you're going to stay there and work for like 2 to 4 years in the Alabuga SEZ at whatever place they tell you to work. And there's no limit, according to the contract you sign, to how much you work. So it turns out a lot of the people are working much more than full time. And if they want to leave their training, if they want to leave Alabuga Polytechnic early, they have to pay like $20,000. And there have been multiple reports of at least 2 students committing suicide because they were so depressed and oppressed, I guess. They didn't feel like they could tell their parents what they're up to. By the way, did I mention that these are high schoolers that go here? You start going there at 16 years old, and there's an insane system of misinformation and false advertising on their website, on YouTube. There's all these fancy, exciting YouTube videos and advertisements. They got some famous Russian TikTok star to feature in one of their ads. And then right when it opened and they were trying to ramp up attendance, there was this huge slew of bloggers that all conveniently took tours of the Alabuga Polytech. And they're like, oh, wow, look how nice and pretty this is, including the one I watched. There was a Russian auto blogger who normally posted stuff about cars. He did a 1.5 hour tour of the place. Of course, nobody ever sees anything about the Kamikaze drones. So all these students go there under false pretenses, thinking they're going to get real training, professional work experience, going to come out on the other end with some sort of degree, and they end up being forced to work in a drone factory. They start out making the Albatross drones, and then once they figure out the technical aspects of that, I think they're ushered into the Shahed 136 military Kamikaze drones. There are also leaked documents that showed that about 50 people from the school were sent to Iran. I think it was about 10 staff and 40 students were sent to Iran for a month in 2023, I think, to learn how to make the drones better because they were undertrained and having trouble with it. So one more step Russia was taking in securing their independence in the manufacturing of these drones. But can you imagine signing up to go to a technical school and then being shipped off to Iran to learn the intricacies of making suicide drones? Anyways, maybe I'm expecting this place to be too nice, because in some of the articles, some of the ones where it talked about the students who committed suicide, it also talked about how all the students, at least for the first few months, were forced to play paintball. They had to play paintball. I don't know what part of a Polytech that is supposed to be. And then the losing team had to dig ditches. And there's videos that someone took and posted online of the muddy, messy hallways, all their wet clothes on the ground, and there's videos of them digging trenches, and they're in camo. And it doesn't, what it seems like to me is that Russia found itself in a war, and they're kind of quietly conscripting part of their population without telling their population that they're conscripting them. I mean, if you sign up to go to Polytech school to be an HVAC repairman and you find yourself digging trenches in the freezing rain and putting bombs in suicide drones, you've got to ask yourself what's going on. All right, and there's one other aspect to this. It's like the other branch of Alabuga Polytech. It's called Alabuga Start. It's like the outreach part where they try to recruit almost exclusively 18 to 22-year-old women from foreign countries. A lot of these are countries closely associated with Russia in what's called the Commonwealth of Independent States, like Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Azerbaijan, Belarus, Tajikistan, and Uzbekistan. But a lot of them do outreach to African countries like Uganda, Algeria, Ethiopia. And they go out there and they get in touch with like the consulate or whatever, or like boarding houses and schools, and they tell these people like, hey, you can come to Russia, you can get paid twice as much as you do here, you can get training, schooling, and they even advertise like weird things like you can find love here. At least one of the advertisements or people, they mention Tinder. The odd thing is they don't offer them a degree for the schooling they get. They only get some kind of certificate. They're told that there are 3 branches that they can enroll in: production operator, service and hospitality, or catering. But hardly any of them get put in service and hospitality or catering. Almost everybody gets put in production operator, and they end up being a cheap migrant labor force for the production of the Shahed 136 drones. In the video I mentioned before, where you could see people working on the Albatross drones, there were a lot of black women, and they tell them that the only requirement to come to Russia is that they know 100 Russian or English words. Anyways, like I said, that's some of the stuff I found out. This stuff is not new or secret. There's multiple news stories about this. It's just I didn't know it, and I was just kind of shocked because of the way I found out about it all, as I was just kind of digging deeper and deeper, and things just kind of got more and more shocking as it all unfolded before me. So yeah, there's just students that enroll under the guise of employment and schooling and are forced or coerced in some way. Sometimes they take their passports so they can't leave the country. They are forced and coerced into this dangerous, hazardous, and physically demanding work that they didn't know they would be doing. They were only told that they would be working with composites, and if they asked what composites were, apparently the answers were elusive. And the students, just being high schoolers, didn't want to tell their parents because they had probably gotten all excited about this amazing opportunity to go to school for free and get employment afterwards. And I don't know. It's a crazy thing. There were a lot of texts I found on one website about a guy texting with his mom who only got his mom to pay the exit fee after he explained how depressed and terrible, how depressed he was and how terrible it was. And she only came and got him after he says, "I have to leave or I'll die." Anyways, thanks for listening, everybody. Sorry if this was a downer, but it is a downer. It's depressing. It's sad that this is happening, but it's interesting at the same time. I wish the best for them. And I mean, maybe that's a shallow thing to say, but goodbye.